The fluorescent lights of the boardroom cast a sterile, unflattering glare, magnifying every tired line around my father's eyes. "You are pulled from the horizon bid until you publicly endorse your brother's strategic lead." His voice, usually a booming instrument of command, was low and tightly controlled, the sound of a man trying to cap a volcano. My brother, Marcus, the self-proclaimed visionary of the family firm, leaned back in his Italian leather chair, a lazy smile playing on his lips. He adjusted the cufflink I knew Mom had gifted him years ago, a deliberate, slow movement designed to emphasize his position. The heavy silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I stared at the polished wood table, at the reflection of the single folder I had brought, my meticulously detailed and now irrelevant competitor analysis. I didn't argue. I didn't even sigh. I simply said, "Understood." That single word, delivered without heat or inflection, was my declaration of independence. If my father, Elias Vance, had possessed even an ounce of curiosity, he might have asked what I truly understood. But he only saw what he wanted to see, the reliable, compliant son, the one who always absorbed the shockwaves of the family business. Growing up in the Vance household, the currency was attention, and Marcus was the ultimate speculator. He mastered the art of the grand gesture, the spontaneous, expensive gift, the emotionally charged public declaration of loyalty, the high-stakes, last-minute rescue, all often required only because of a previous error he'd made. I was the architect of substance. I was the quiet, necessary force that built the foundation, stabilized the finances, and delivered the actual product. I remember my 8th grade science fair. Marcus, 3 years my senior, had built a volcano that used baking soda and vinegar. It was messy, dramatic, and won the most entertaining prize. I had built a fully functional, small-scale solar power model, complete with a circuit diagram and efficiency report. It won most technically proficient. My father barely glanced at my intricate wiring. "Marcus has the fire," he announced later at dinner. "You, Daniel, you have the patience. You'll keep the lights on." Patience became my assigned identity, a role I played until I realized it was a cage. The acceptance letter to the Wharton School of Business was my quiet triumph. It arrived a week before Marcus announced his engagement to a woman who possessed a talent for event planning and a network of society connections. The ensuing celebrations, the endless calls, the lavish party planning consumed the house. My father, in a brief moment between calls with the florist and the caterer, patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good, son. Now you can learn how to manage the money Marcus is going to bring in." The acceptance letter vanished beneath a mountain of wedding invitations, its importance eclipsed by the spectacle. When my mother passed away 5 years ago, the ecosystem of the Vance family collapsed into its rawest, most hierarchical form. Mom had been the only person capable of seeing the difference between Marcus's smoke and mirrors and my grounded, often unseen effort. She noticed the dark circles under my eyes after I spent a week securing a critical merger. She was the one who celebrated my completed projects privately. With her gone, the family business, Vance Dynamics, lost its soul and exposed its brutal structure. In Vance Dynamics, a boutique investment and acquisition firm, the roles were absolute. Marcus, as head of strategy, handled the pitch. He was charm personified, selling ideas that were often financially unsound but emotionally compelling. I, as chief operating officer, handled the proof. My job was to take Marcus's fantastical promises, guaranteed 30% ROIs, impossible 4-month turnaround times on complex acquisitions, and somehow bend reality to meet them. My team, the analysts, risk managers, and operations specialists, were the best in the city. They trusted me because I never asked them to perform miracles. I asked them to do the math and then fiercely defended their numbers, often in brutal, late-night sessions with the legal department, who were constantly trying to reconcile Marcus's guarantees with reality. My father, the CEO, always sided with the spectacle. Marcus understands the client vision, he would insist, dismissing my risk reports. Daniel, you handle the gears. Just make it work. And I always did. The company's success, its reputation for delivering impossible results, was built on the back of my quiet, tireless remediation. I documented every single step: financial projections, internal memos highlighting unrealistic deadlines, email chains proving Marcus had promised deliverables without consulting the finance or operations teams. It wasn't an act of betrayal. It was self-preservation. It was the only language of truth in a house built on narrative. The Horizon bid was the culmination of this destructive pattern. A multi-billion-dollar acquisition, the largest in the firm's history. My analysis showed the target company's debt structure was too complex, the regulatory hurdles too high for Marcus's aggressive timeline. I presented a detailed, phased approach, a 12-month timeline which offered a secure 18% ROI. Marcus presented a 6-month, disruptive strategy guaranteeing a 35% ROI contingent on several highly optimistic market shifts. My father listened to my data for 10 minutes, then slammed his hand on the table. I need fire, Daniel. I need to tell the shareholders we are leading, not trailing. Marcus's plan is aggressive, and that's what we are. Get behind him. The dismissal was complete, the hierarchy cemented. My lifetime of meticulous work was irrelevant compared to Marcus's audacity. Standing in the hallway after the meeting, the marble floor suddenly felt cold, slippery. Junior partners hurried past, carefully avoiding eye contact, terrified of being associated with the losing side. They didn't see a competent executive. They saw a family disappointment. When I reached my office, a memo was waiting, taped with almost aggressive precision to my door. It was an internal restructuring notice. Marcus, effective immediately, was elevated to President of Strategy and Operations. My title, COO, was replaced with Chief Risk Consultant, a powerless advisory position that meant, quite literally, I would only be allowed to state the obvious dangers, which would then be ignored. My phone started vibrating immediately. Texts from my team lead. This can't be real. Are we supposed to follow Marcus's budget? Another. We're being hung out to dry. I flipped the phone face down. Silence was my only protection now. My father called minutes later. It's about stability, Daniel. We have to show a united front to the board. Apologize to Marcus. Endorse the new structure. Do your job, son. Family comes first. The word family tasted like obligation and exhaustion. Just as I ended the call, Marcus appeared in the doorway, radiating smug victory. He didn't knock. He just leaned against the frame, surveying my office as if measuring the square footage he was about to inherit. It's not too late to save face, Daniel, he said, his voice a low, condescending purr. Just issue a statement saying you miscalculated the risk. Take the fall. Dad will put you back on a project next quarter. He straightened his expensive tie, confident he was offering a generous pardon. I looked at him, not with anger, but with an immense, liberating clarity. I saw the empty charm, the complete absence of a moral or technical core. I had spent my life cleaning up his collateral damage. I didn't dignify his offer with an answer. I picked up my briefcase, closed my laptop, and stood up. What, that's it? He asked, genuinely puzzled by my lack of reaction. No screaming? No threats? I simply looked at him. Then, I spoke the word that had ended our war before it began. Understood. I walked past him, opened the door, and let the latch click shut. The sound was small, yet it marked the demolition of my old life. Back inside, I began the meticulous task of separation. I ignored the messages piling up on my phone. The first things I packed were the notebooks, the true history of Vance Dynamics, financial reconciliations, debt restructuring plans I'd implemented under impossible deadlines, and the detailed, confidential notes from every acquisition I'd rescued from Marcus's poor planning. I gathered the hard drives containing proprietary risk models, models that were integral to the firm's operational stability, models that only I truly understood. I didn't need to steal anything. I only needed to gather the evidence of my own indispensable role. I opened a clean file on my computer. A resignation letter, 3 paragraphs long. No accusation, no drama, just the legal language of severing ties. Then, the true work began. I accessed the secure server one last time. I didn't delete, damage, or sabotage. I compiled. I took every single document I had ever created, the financial models for the last 10 successful acquisitions, the internal risk assessments that proved Marcus's projections were impossible, and the final horizon bid analysis that guaranteed a sustainable return. I organized it all into one massive, chronological file, labeled Vance Dynamics, Comprehensive Operational History and Risk Analysis, 2018-2025. I attached the resignation letter to the file. Then I checked the clock. Timing was everything. I waited until 11:59 p.m., precisely when the U.S. markets closed, ensuring the impact would hit during the early Asian trading hours, guaranteeing maximum disruption. I sent the file. The recipients, the Vance Dynamics Board of Directors, the lead general counsel, and, most powerfully, the entire executive committee of the Horizon Group. The subject line, Final Operations and Due Diligence Review. No context, just the cold, hard data. My phone rang within seconds, vibrating on the desk where my laptop used to be. The general counsel first, then a senior board member, then my father. All unanswered. Marcus burst back into my office just as the clock ticked past midnight. He was frantic, his carefully constructed mask finally melting. "What did you send? The general counsel is calling me at midnight. What did you do, Daniel?" His eyes darted to the empty walls, the clear desk. He finally understood. I placed the last hard drive into my briefcase and zipped it shut with a quiet, decisive sound. "You can't do this. You'll destroy the family." His voice was ragged. I stood up, facing him directly. "I'm not destroying the family, Marcus. I'm simply withdrawing my support from the illusion." He stammered, his usual swagger dissolving. "Dad will ruin you. He'll make sure you never work in this industry again." "The industry needs competence, Marcus," I said, my voice steady. "You need a narrative. We are no longer the same market." I walked past him. In the hallway, the cleaning crew was moving quietly, their presence the only constant in the collapsing company structure. Each step felt lighter, each step a further escape from the weight of his entitlement. By the time I reached the elevator, my lock screen flashed. A text from an old mentor, now the CEO of a major private equity firm. "Call me immediately. I saw your horizon analysis. It's brilliant. Let's talk about a new kind of COO role." I smiled faintly. The silence had already done its work. I drove home. The city skyline, usually a source of anxiety and ambition, now looked neutral, just concrete and glass. In my apartment, the quiet was not empty. It was spacious. I set the briefcase down, opened it, and pulled out the physical copies of my risk reports. I signed the resignation letter, the pen gliding smoothly over the paper, finalizing the divorce from my old life. The next morning, I arrived at Vance Dynamics for the final meeting. The tension in the building was palpable. The air conditioning seemed to hum with corporate dread. Everyone knew. I walked directly to the boardroom. My father, Marcus, and the company lawyer, Mr. Stern, were waiting. My father looked broken, his suit rumpled, his face gray. Marcus stood near the window, pacing a tight circle. I sat down and placed the signed resignation letter on the table. My father spoke first, his voice barely a whisper. "Daniel, we can fix this. Marcus is willing to share authority. We'll rewrite your contract. I'm here to finalize the severance and vesting terms outlined in Section 14, I stated. A demotion to a non-executive advisory role without documented technical review triggers an immediate, non-negotiable exit." Mr. Stern, the lawyer, swallowed hard. "The contract is airtight, Elias. Daniel drafted it 4 years ago. It protects him completely. Marcus slammed his fist on the windowsill. You engineered this. This is sabotage. I slid a clean manila folder across the table. It contained printed copies of the email chains proving that Marcus had dismissed technical warnings on 3 prior, highly successful acquisitions, which I had salvaged. I didn't engineer anything. I documented your risk, Marcus. I was simply the contingency plan you never wanted to read. The lawyer opened the folder, his eyes widening as he recognized the high-stakes history. My father looked at the documents, finally seeing the proof he had chosen to ignore for a decade. The Hamilton Group has pulled out of the Horizon bid, my father announced, his voice heavy with defeat. Your analysis proved our current model is unsustainable. It was always unsustainable, I replied. I just stopped correcting the numbers. Marcus turned to our father, his face contorted. You're blaming me? I brought in the business. My father looked at him, not with the blind admiration he usually held, but with cold, devastating realization. You brought in the high-wire axe, Marcus. Your brother built the safety net. I stood up. I've accepted the role of Chief Strategy Officer at Hawthorne Capital. Marcus scoffed, a brittle, desperate sound. Hawthorne? They're vultures. They'll eat you alive. The lawyer closed the folder, a look of profound respect on his face. They recognize value, Marcus, and now they have the architect. I met my father's eyes one last time. They held regret, confusion, and a flicker of the love he had misplaced. Don't go, Daniel. We need you. I needed to be needed for the right reasons, I said softly. I already left years ago. I'm just making it official. I walked out. The executive floor was silent, the secrets and compromises of Vance Dynamics held tightly in the air I left behind. The elevator doors shut, and I watched the floor numbers descend, leaving the noise, the drama, and the false promises behind. I drove to my new office. Hawthorne Capital's headquarters were sleek, modern, and open, a design philosophy built on transparency. My new team was smart, focused, and didn't require me to manage their executive brother's ego. Later that afternoon, standing by the window of my new, much larger office, I watched the city. I thought of the solar-powered model, the silence of the ignored risk reports, and the single, simple word, understood. My career had been a slow, painstaking accumulation of fact over fiction, and my freedom had been earned not with a scream, but with a quiet, devastating release of truth. The silence that surrounded me now wasn't the heavy, obligatory silence of the Vance boardroom. It was the spacious, generative silence of a leader finally in control of his own narrative. I had been the anchor for too long. Now I was the sail. If you are currently the quiet foundation of a family or a company that mistakes your competence for subservience, remember this. The greatest power is not in the performance, but in the precision of the facts you hold and the quiet, calculated moment you choose to walk away. Your worth is not determined by their permission,